Going on, Marty?
I'm good, my man. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
we're doing some more content for the Sober Reading channel. That's probably not the exact name yet, but
Okay.
I continue to work on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something like that. Reading and recovery, another possibility.
Okay, that
Uh,
flows a little bit
it flows a little bit better. I
smoother.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are books that have some sort of relation or meaning, to our recovery in some kind of way or another. Just facilitate a conversation about recovery, about like what it was like before even we got into any sort of program of recovery. We're talking mostly you and I about a 12-step program, AA, but it really could apply to anything where we're trying to make a change. I'm excited about this book that you chose, although I was probably
It was.
prompted a bit by me, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it was incepted by you, but it was a book I was looking forward to reading for quite some time. And given the opportunity, I thought it would be a good discussion for both of us, since we definitely have experience and varying viewpoints on this subject itself.
Cool. So the book is High Weirdness by a really cool religious studies professor. I think he's at Berkeley, Eric Davis. I've read a couple of his books. I've also read this book about like how some forms of humanism are like becoming the new transhumanism in specific, becoming the new like form of Gnosticism. I think it was called Technosis. I think was the name of his other book. But
Okay.
anyways, and that preceded this book. And I've seen him give talks on YouTube and stuff like that before. He seems like a pretty cool guy. And I have a history of religions background, a religious studies background, and it's like kind of cool to see that a lot of what he references and has read through is like all stuff that we did and read in our history of religions / religious studies kind of background. But I thought this book was specifically a good choice for you, and I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, my background, I have a degree in neuroscience with a molecular and cellular specialization, and a lot of that decision to go into that field was kind of based around my affinity for psychoactive substances and
Affinity?
being a young kid that had interest in all things weird and mind bending or mind numbing. Pick either or. Really kind of drew me to that. I mean, there are obviously other reasonings and explanations behind it, but I think deciding what I wanted to focus on, I decided on something that I experienced and had an interest for. This book, I think from a religious standpoint, I've always been investigatory in at least a sense of I was unsure of where my alliance laid in terms of who I believed in or what sect I believed in. And it was definitely...
You've been a seeker. Is
I've
that
been
a good term for you?
Yeah, I was always frustrated because I never found a summation that I agreed with. I never fully accepted any specific ideology, and therefore I had to find the correct one for me, which led me down every path. And then as soon as I would realize that I didn't encompass everything that they did, I would move on to the next. And it became this like perpetual cycle of seeking something that I aligned with, and that just never happened. So I think I couldn't find spiritual guidance outward. So I think I turned inward and thought I could find it within myself.
And so, well, let me just say first of all about the title. I'm gonna come right back to that, but
Okay.
the title High Weirdness. So the weirdness here, I mean, weirdness has a long, cool history that he goes through that I don't want to get into too much, like just etymologically speaking, but the weird sisters of Shakespeare in Macbeth are kind of like one of the first touch points in the book, and they also seem to be a reference to the Fates, those weird sisters in Greek mythology in particular, and just the way that the concept of fate and working out our fate, and if there are any ways we can challenge or change, our destiny and that kind of a thing, through weirdness, and so we're going to get into what that really means. But as a preliminary definition, I would just say something that is just irreducibly ambiguous or indeterminate, hard to pin down, something that doesn't fit into any paradigm. So like you were talking about searching around for a kind of interpretive framework, paradigm, if you will, to like understand, you know, the world and yourself and that kind of a thing. And, you know, weirdness is an interesting one because it's kind of like the paradigm that breaks paradigms, breaks all the other paradigms or whatever. Yeah.
The sincerest anomaly.
Which is a
very
great thing
sincere anomaly. Yeah.
That totally so anomalous that it like makes you totally rethink whatever paradigm, you know, speaking of it neurologically or neurobiologically, you know, according to your, you know, your background kind of way of thinking about it, you know, breaking out of this default mode network somehow, like your normal ways of thinking about things, just because there's something that's just undeniably weird, anomalous, ambiguous, that just cannot be reduced by the scientific understanding, by you know, by the even the religious understanding. This is not religion like finding the right framework to interpret the world or anything like that. This is like learning to be in a world that's irreducibly weird. So you know, that which brings us back to, you know, your experience as a psychonaut. So another term I kind of want to explore with people. You know, what's your kind of definition or understanding, and do you relate to that term in your own experience or not?
I think I relate to it in terms of my experiences. I definitely was very interested in reframing my mind in any way possible, diving into any deep corners I thought had been undiscovered, you know, trying to open up some part of myself that I was looking for, even though there wasn't a specific goal or point I was trying to reach. I thought there was something under the surface that I could find. Slowly but surely, I try to, you know, work within the cornucopia of psychoactive substances and come out with something undiscovered before. I shared with you one of my professors, my first day of class. His first slide was a photo. He was our psychopharmacology teacher, and it was a photo of an apple. And he described all 52 psychoactive substances contained in it. And that just threw me for a loop because it meant that my cornucopia of drugs had now just expanded to apples and other fruits and vegetables I could, you know, dive into. But yeah, I definitely relate in a sense that I wanted to experience something outside of our known world. I don't think I did it experimentally in a sense that I ran tests. You know, I didn't create a specific setting
protocol
for me
or whatever.
Programmatic. I definitely had, you know, various experiences depending on where I was in life or where I was, even just my position in the world, you know, where, you know, what area I was in. But yeah, I definitely didn't run it as a series of, oh, I got new data out of this run. Let me go back, try it a different way and see what the result is. You know? It was definitely more of getting together with a bunch of friends and seeing what we would seeing what we could get into and find out. And each time it definitely became weirder and weirder and weirder, and it wasn't always a positive experience. I will say that firsthand.
Well, you said even to me, which is like fascinating, is I was mostly extremely nightmarish and negative.
Yeah.
And like, so like we'll get into that more later, but like we're gonna not be like one way or the other. We're not gonna be like totally in praise because like that's ridiculous. This is not a pay on to psychedelics, but it's significant in a program of recovery because it has a history, especially in AA, in the sense that our founder Bill W. was involved in I think about a 6-year-long program with LSD, in the early '60s, to like see if, and he really preached it for a while and thought that it was possible that psychedelics might offer a remedy to addiction. And we'll talk more about like why he thought that and like why he eventually, I don't know if he totally rejected it, but like I think both you and me reject that.
Yeah.
And so like, that's part of what we're gonna do. But on the other hand, this is not a total rejection either. We're not here to like be the, I don't know, fuddy-duddies or whatever who like totally like tell the kids, you're going to fry your brains out and die or whatever. Because these types. So for one, there's a big renaissance now of belief that psychotropic. Well, let's say psychoactive, but I don't know. Just like all the classification. Is there a better name for psychedelics? We'll just use that term.
Psychedelics.
For there's
as an umbrella term. Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah. So there's another like kind of interesting renaissance that's been going on for at least the last 10 years. And there's more and more mainstream legitimacy given nowadays to the idea that there's curative, therapeutic, possibilities with psychedelics, which I don't think either one of us are going to say that's totally false or that's totally, true. Like they're unbelievable, go for it or whatever. We're here to kind of like think about its relation to recovery. And like also in your case in particular, like what relation it was to your life before recovery and specifically. And so I just would say that, we're, open-minded explorers. We're not here to like, condemn it or to promote it. We're just here to, think about it really. So anyways, I kind of cut you off. You were talking about, whether your nautical experiences, what they were about, like what you, like, I guess kind of like what you thought you were doing. Way to put it, maybe.
I mean, I don't think there was any sort of initial drive when it started behind just wanting to get weird with some friends. I think gradually, especially the frequency of horrible experiences I had, there was something that kept pulling me back into trying it again, into doing it again. I mean, we've tried to put our finger on what that actually was. The only way that I could phrase it at this point is that I was looking for something that I was unsure of what I was looking for, but I knew there was something that I could get to if I at least did it enough and did it the correct way. It turned out there wasn't a correct way to do it. There was no secret sauce that I could have added to that psychoactive recipe to get me to a place, at least in my mind. But each time was a different experience. And
was that place like a final like way to understand the world? Was it like an encounter with God? Well, did you have any kind of thoughts about any of that?
I think I was just very confused all the time about the nature of reality. I had too many questions that were unanswered, and I wasn't getting the necessary information, I thought, to make any sort of solidified, decision about the nature of reality, or more importantly, I think with hallucinogen, it was my position in the world. I know we talked about before where each time I don't think I ever dove into my past, my future, or even like characteristics about myself. It always relayed back to my position within the world, whether that be, in a cosmic sense or just in like a societal presence where I didn't know where I fit into,
Yeah.
And I think those trips sent me so far outside of myself that I was able to kind of crawl my way back to my own position in the world, and it made me feel more solidified and steadfast in like where I was.
Yeah.
I don't think it was ever curing any specific, it didn't open up any part of, as I said, my past, present, or future. It just made me more okay with maybe where I was in life when I was out of it, As I said, I think every time your trip is to somewhere that you can't control and to somewhere that you don't entirely understand. And then I think when you come back to reality and you have that tangible presence that you can say, this is where I am, this is who I am, it almost makes you more comfortable with, your place in the world. I mean, if
so this is like really kind of, when you first told me this, I was like totally like, this is like really interesting, because I don't know if this is the way that a lot of people formulate their psychonautical like journeys. But like yours, maybe they do, but yours is like this sort of like getting completely lost, disoriented to a frightful extent. So you describe a lot of these situations as like intensely nightmarish. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of the trips, as a lot of people I know can relate to, is that you get to a spot where you feel claustrophobic in your own head to where you don't feel that there's any way out of that state. I mean, I think multiple people have the early come up butterflies and they feel this alarming anxiety, which I believe is due to your 5-HT1A receptor that what LSD acts on. However, you feel this overwhelming, I cannot get back to this. I've had friends stand up in situations and exclaim, we will never see certain people in our lives again, not because they thought anything happened to those people or their relation to that person had changed. However, they were stuck in that position for eternity. You hear stories of people being lost for decades in their own mind, and then they come back and they're, sitting on their couch in place where they should be. And it's just the most relief that you could possibly feel is when you come back, at least in my experience. And yeah, I think again, it's just, I felt that life was weird and I didn't understand it. So if I could find an even weirder, it would make my day-to-day life
seem normal
in comparison. Or at least I could comprehend it
it's totally fascinating.
At a better level,
It may be relevant to the history of of psychedelics to note that soon after it was synthesized, one of the first actual legitimate uses was to induce psychosis in psychologists and just people in a psychotherapeutic environment, therapists, so that they can experience what their psychotic patients were going through.
Yeah, I believe it was. Is it a mimetic? Where it's supposed to? Yeah.
Well, and the question is how much of a mimetic is it if you're actually psychotic while you're on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it imitating psychosis, or are you in an actual psychotic state?
Well, when you're in it, there is absolutely no second thought that what you're experiencing is not real. There is zero moment that I've ever had when I'm in the thralls of a trip that I question the reality of what I'm experiencing. I mean, it is gospel, it is truth, it is everything that you thought you were looking for, you now found. Okay. And then when you start to come out of it, all of those truths that you've uncovered seem to regress into just being fabrications of the trip. Yeah. So it's real interesting. Although it's a long experience, the introduction to a psychotic state and then immediate regression is very fast. Yeah. How many people in a schizophrenic, psychotic episode or stance can go in and out as quickly as you can with LSD? I mean, but yeah, I mean, you definitely are in a psychotic state, in my opinion, when you're on it. I mean, there's nothing that could pull you out of it. You are completely untethered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and this is one of the figures. I'll just mention the figures that we're going to be covering, or that Eric Davis covers, which is the McKenna brothers, Terrence and Dennis, Robert Anton Wilson, and Philip K. Dick. And famously, Philip K. Dick really didn't use psychedelics. Mm-hmm. He was actually psychotic and would flip in and out of it. And I would argue, was at his best when he could flip in and out of it. When he was in it, but he had this sort of way of distancing himself from it at the same time. And we'll talk way more about this when we get into Philip K. Dick. Mm-hmm. So that he could get whatever he was getting, from the psychosis, but at the same time be enough in a neurotic position where he could question and even, in books like Valis, make fun of the part of him that was in the psychotic state. So literally to step outside of himself and be watching himself as a psychotic. But anyway, we'll definitely get more into that. And it is interesting because both you and I, wound up just regular drunks. I never went very far at all with psychedelics. Never got anything out of it. But I wound up just medicating, if you want to put it that way, with alcohol. And it has, obviously, psychological, physiological effects. But it's nothing like, I mean, one thing that people talk about with, psychedelics is that supposedly they're not addiction they don't form addictions. Whereas there's like this very like obviously robust literature that alcohol does, like in the most classical sense of an addiction, where you are physically dependent in some way or whatever.
I remember when we were younger, psychedelics were very not scary in a sense that we were never afraid of becoming addicted, because the experience itself was so heavy that you wouldn't want to experience that on a frequent basis.
Yeah, you did, at least for a time. That's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Most people have one bad trip and they're done forever.
Yeah, I mean, I had subsequent, I would say, I don't know, maybe 10 direct experiences back to back where they were negative. And I think the only way, and I think begrudgingly,
I would be heroic, but
I would enter them begrudgingly as well, or someone would be like, "Hey man, like tonight's the night," and I'd be like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be horrible," I was aware, and I don't know if that set the trip to start off in a negative way. However, I don't think anyone that has done like high dose LSD trips would want to experience it on a frequent basis. I mean, I think the snapback to reality is extremely taxing on your brain, to where I've described it before as you can almost feel a pressure in the back of your head, at the bottom of your brain, to where it almost feels weakened. And I know it's completely psychosomatic, I imagine, but you feel like, oh, I should probably cool down for a bit before that doesn't snap back. I mean, I think there's a fear that it brings to where, you're lost for so many hours that if you repetitively enter that space, you might never come back. Similar to what a psychotic episode could offer,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting too. So the first difference that we're kind of perhaps outlining is like this, ability to, get you into sort of an addictive, I think there maybe are people who do get addicted to psychotics to psychedelics, but like I don't know that that's like a huge thing.
I think they would have to be quite sadistic. I genuinely think they would have to enjoy forming, even for a moment. I would categorize them as like small traumas, that you're.
That's fascinating.
I think
I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
When people reference having PTSD for a traumatic event, I think you talk to a lot of people that have significant experience with psychoactive drugs, and a lot of their responses mimic, in my mind, a PTSD mindset, at least. Because it is traumatic. I mean, you come out of it. I think the only reason I made it so long with these horrible experiences was that I tried to reframe it as, oh, that wasn't negative. It was just weird, and I made it out.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if it actually impacted personality, or I know some people, we've joked about how a lot of men will go through psychoactive experiences and they say, I've now learned empathy.
Oh, right.
Like they didn't have that before, and it instilled something in them. I don't think I ever was instilled with any new emotion or, I think it just broke me out of my normal state, and I crawled my way back, and it was something that I wanted to. I don't know though. I was never proud. I never gave myself a gold medal for making it back. It wasn't like I climbed a mountain and found my way back.
Another kudos to you, because there's a lot of like fucking new age guru dudes who like. Honestly, I feel like they've awarded themselves some kind of gold medal, a savior complex, whatever, because they've seen shit, man. That like nobody else. I mean, so they know the ultimate nature of reality, which is like the opposite of the theology that Eric Davis is articulating in this book, which is like what the psychedelic for these psychonauts did is like create this ambiguous space. So you talked about like being utterly in the psychotic position in on the when you're peaking on the drug, so that it's like no doubt, no question, and then as you come down, then the doubt comes back or whatever. And so like that's the sort of interplay that Eric Davis is really interested in, so that like it's like nothing interesting or of substance was revealed to me, it was all bullshit, like but maybe something, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean,
it's always like this, like I can't, say one way or another. And so like the value of it is for like a certain type of religious experience, which is not the sort of like psychotic, what's sometimes even called religious psychosis, where you like become convinced of some whatever programmatic, like
yeah.
religious system of like whatever, but like rather, especially with the idea around like breaking down the default mode network, breaking your normal ways of thinking, what it introduces is a sort of ambiguity that can also be freeing because it reduces certainty, which is this incredible irony given that, in neuroscience nowadays, like the understanding of what a human being is as a prediction machine. So, and a prediction machine designed to reduce uncertainty, and the claim of this type of religious experience, at any rate, as I understand it, is that like this is to produce uncertainty so that you can get out of the trap of certainty. A certain type of any type of certainty is psychotic in some sense, according to this thesis. And so like getting out of that is like a religious experience, which is the opposite of what I think a lot of people think of an epiphany, or an ecstasy or a enthusiasm or whatever. It's like you are giving some totalizing absolute revelation, kind of like according to the mode of seeking for the answer, sort of a thing or whatever, or an encounter with God or whatever. And the thing is like, according to the thesis of this book, like that encounter is going to be like, oh, was it God? Was it what was it? Like it was something, like, but it was like not anything, like that I can readily, depict, explain, identify, reduce uncertainty around, or reduce the ambiguity to zero in any way.
Yeah, I think it remains ambiguous after the fact. I know James in the book references the peripheral being brought into view. Yeah. And the problem is
William
that
James.
once that peripheral is opened, it then closes, and then whatever is stuck in that position remains there. It's not like you have now free access to explore that peripheral.
Yeah.
It closes back in, and then I think an issue that people lead is they keep trying to bring that back into view, but the only way to do so is to re-enter that state or to get into a state of psychosis to where you always have that readily available, and then you kind of lose the plot of what is actually in view. I mean, I think you said the brain is designed to reduce information, and when you open up too much, you kind of get lost. I think there's no way that you can rectify the peripheral and the
pattern recognition. Yeah. Like you cannot identify the pattern. It's just like that there's things going on or whatever, but like you don't know what it is. Like a lot of times,
no.
And it's interesting too that like the trips are often thought of as like similar in some regards, but not entirely, to near-death experiences. And there's like a whole literature mapping like similarities and differences, but both of them share this characteristic of like symbolic sort of like meanings that are like like trying to say something, or you think they're trying to say something or teach you something. There's a lot of encounters with teachers, but these teachers that they encounter, especially somebody like Robert Anton Wilson and the McKenna brothers, are trickster figures. So it's like whatever, like it takes you to a more shamanistic or animistic version of religion, where it's not like the people who like are going to preach from the pulpit what to do, set of rules, like these are the laws, these are the doctrines, these are the dogmas, whatever. It's like somebody who's there to like introduce like the essentially tricky nature of the universe itself. It's not just that you're what's being revealed to you is like that, like the universe itself in some ways is a tricky place, like and so going back to Robert Anton Wilson again, we'll get way more into this, is like his whole idea roughly is that like we can sort of like take something that is like fantastical and trick it into existence. And he's like the greatest example of this, because there's a pretty good argument that the Illuminati, his Illuminati trilogy especially, is responsible for like all the bullshit Illuminati stuff that you see nowadays, where you see this what's sometimes called hyperstition, where you dream something up. The ultimate example that we talked about is the Necronomicon
from Lovecraft.
Lovecraft,
Yeah.
which gets mentioned, is like totally fictitious book. Lovecraft puts it in his fiction to make some character's library seem scary and weird because he's got a book in there called the Necronomicon. People take it as if it were a real book, and soon the thing gets written and it is a real book. It's like this weird way of like coaxing, tricking, reality, and then whatever reality is, and then reality tricking people back. And so I don't know. It's just like this full-on weirdness, and this is I suppose, the second main idea around high weirdness is that it is irreducible ambiguity. Is kind of the first. Like it introduces you to stuff that you can't think yourself around or into or whatever, and every time you do, like it kind of falls apart. But the second thing is like it introduces this notion that there's a sense in which sometimes it's called active imagination, especially somebody like Carl Jung was big into that, but even before that, somebody like William Blake or whatever, this idea that like your imagination has a certain reality to it, but it's a very precarious reality. It's a very ambiguous reality. You don't know what its ontological status is or like how, but it seems to have some level of reality. It's not just, you can't reduce it to total hallucination or total like whatever. Like
yeah, I mean, I think of like being in a hypnagogic state or
nice, yeah.
I know personally I've experienced hypnagogia for years, to where
Defined as how?
in my experience I've had sleep studies done to try to find a root cause, but essentially I will wake up and interact with fantasy characters in my room, wherever I am, and I will wake up and still be in a dreamlike state. However, it's like an in between dream state and awake state, to where I will start interacting with characters. I will get up, walk around, start interacting with things that aren't there, and I'm aware that I'm doing it, but it's from a psychotic stance where I am completely
In it.
I am invested in what these people are saying, and then slowly they will kind of disappear, and then I'll be sitting there just standing in the middle of my room with nothing around me that wasn't there before. And it's this real interesting state that you get out of, and you realize that those characters weren't obviously you realize that they were never there, and I don't know.
But like, I think part of the thesis of this book, and not to deny that they weren't ever there, but part of the idea or part of the playfulness of this book, let's say, is that like to try to like understand like they weren't ever there. Fine, they were just like mere like figments of my imagination, but nonetheless, there was some sort of like reality about it that was like beyond just like, I don't know, thin air, which maybe it was just thin air. So, but the thesis of this book is like, whatever happens in the imagination, whether it's in a hypnagogic state or whether it's in, an actual psychedelic trip, it's not entirely reducible to just like brain chemistry and and like whatever the drug you took was or whatever.
Well, I think one of the most frustrating points of my college career was realizing that all of these things I believe that neuroscience and biology would provide, all the answers, they never encompassed the entirety of whatever they were asking. Like the answers were never. There was always some sort of anomaly outside their description or solution to a neurological phenomena or mental illness, where they could point to a symptom and they could see that symptom was being reduced or removed, but there was still something outside of that pharmacological solution that they couldn't actually describe or couldn't actually fix.
Yeah. So like these things are like a symptom or a condition or whatever are irreducibly ambiguous in a lot of senses. And one is that we don't have complete medical control over any of them. So that's like one of the things that we find out, in AA is like there's no like, total solution, especially because what happens is like after you get sober, like whatever was like primary, was it depression? Was it like trauma, induced, PTSD whatever it was that you were treating, and this brings me to, the sort of like my long career of like mainly just drinking, like thinking that I was treating my intensity, my natural intensity actually. So like trying to calm myself down, like the basic way that I understood it. I mean, well, the basic way the medical field understands it is ADHD. That's the diagnosis given. But as with every naming, every neurobiological description, what I think you're saying, and certainly what the book is saying, is there's always this part of it that isn't named, that escapes whatever determination you make about it. So that like in whatever way that determination gives you some predictive ability to recognize the patterns of this, specifically named symptom, disease, whatever, there's all this irreducible ambiguity that escapes that diagnosis.
Yeah.
So that's like the name, and I mean, in history of religions wise, knowing the name like gave you a certain power over something, which is like what's around the whole like God not giving Moses his name. It's like all around like, roughly understood as like demonology, like learning the name of whatever it was, like gave you some sort of power over it. But like as, history of religions also shows, especially with demonology, is that like learning the demon's name and what his gig is, sometimes could allow you to bind the demon, but usually you're the one binding yourself. Or the demon is the one binding you or whatever.
Well, I think in AA terms, a lot of people get bound by certain statements about, alcoholism is a disease of, and then they insert a word, and now your entire framework for why you're an alcoholic is focused around that one word or statement.
Yeah.
It becomes a determined, non-ambiguous, like this is why you are the way you are, which in reality, I mean, the trite saying of people contain multitudes, I think.
Yeah, they do.
It's trite.
Until like somebody convinces them, no, you're this.
Yeah.
This is your identity or whatever. And like whatever it is you're going through or experiencing can be reduced to this, understood this way. Here's how this works. And here's the program that like fixes whatever it is. And it's allowed, unfortunately, especially older generation of people in recovery to like understand their problem as just this thing, and then like whatever else comes up they can like ignore it because at least they're not drinking or whatever. And they don't have to dive into it because they're treating like the problem, which is this one thing and this is how you do it and blah blah blah. So many people get sober though, and the reason why it doesn't work is because all the things that they were treating with their alcoholism or with their addiction are now untreated.
Yeah, and they remain.
Yeah. And so, like, and it's a spiritual solution, which is, I think, where we'll have to end up. But, like, it is, like, the spiritual solution here is a very interesting part of AA, because so much of what we're going to get into is the medical solution versus the spiritual solution. A lot of people nowadays want to make those two things the same and make them smoothly exist with each other within AA. But there are people in both camps. There are people in the medical camp who think a spiritual solution is stupid, that AA is useless, so that, you should, just get on whatever, meds you need to get on. And so, like, if you go to a psychiatrist, they're generally going to give you antidepressants because usually, it looks like you're depressed. So, like, like you're going to be able to like drink normally because you won't need to treat your depression with the alcohol if you take the psychotropic drug. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But like, and then there's the AA guy who totally rejects the medical stuff, thinks like whatever psychotropic drugs, antidepressants especially, are just like the psychological industrial complex, just or pharmaceutical companies basically selling you a solution, and then each one of the extremes thinks the other is a huckster, is a trickster, which is like, again, very fascinating. That like that's the type of like figure that is the centerpiece of this book, is this undecidable trickster. And that's the thing, like it is this undecidable sort of position. Like, is it a totally medical solution to this? I mean, it's becoming more and more. I mean, there were always drugs that if you took them, they could make you sick.
Yeah.
Like if you tried to, and then now they're talking about drugs that like totally end the craving for, alcohol or drugs or whatever. I don't really know how far these things go.
I would question what else they would end the craving for, Would it
right.
reduce you to some boring,
just like antipsychotics, frankly.
Yeah, they don't know a specific mechanism. They're gonna disrupt everything,
Yeah. So like, it's not. Like, that is I guess the theme of like the irreducible ambiguity bit is like, no, not one of those solutions in isolation at any rate is the total answer.
Yeah.
And even though they might be mutually contradictory in some sense, like sometimes like a lot of people in AA find working both the medical angle and the spiritual angle at the same time, even though there's this tension between the two of them, that being in that contradiction is like the place to be. So that's a way to think about like the unusual spiritual nature of this journey, that it's not for the total answer at all. Carl Jung has this famous letter to, it's to a guy in AA whose name all of a sudden I'm forgetting. He actually was an alcoholic who went to Jung for treatment. I feel like his name is like Tibby something. I don't know. But anyways, and this letter is actually something you can see online from Jung to this guy. And in it, Jung articulates that like alcoholism, is interestingly, the alcohol term in many cultures is spirits, and that it's related to spirituality in the sense that it's somehow for Jung a low level spiritual seeking. I mean, I would say the psychonautic quest is high, high level, high weirdness. You're going for it or whatever. But like, Jung's idea was that at least with alcoholism, you're like on a kind of like lazy search for God. It's like this crutch almost. So like you're so much deeper than that though for Jung, and so you're never going to be satisfied with that, but yet you get stuck in this repetition of like trying to seek whatever it is that you're looking for in the bottle. For me, it was definitely like a sense of ease and comfort, or like take the edge off my personality, whatever was my idea about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, obviously going through this journey and becoming sober, I have asked that question, what is the one thing that is an explanation for why I am an alcoholic? What is the one thing I can point to? Obviously, that has not yielded any specific result that I could point to. However, I think it's interesting in reading this book and kind of reframing a lot of things I've questioned before, in a sense that my alcoholism was driven, I think, severely by my past experiences with psychoactive substances and going into a state of psychosis where I was given all these answers that I held to be true. As those slowly were removed, I was now displaced again in my position in the world, and I felt like everything was played out. I felt like everything I didn't want to contribute to anything because it wasn't as important as my place was when I was in this psychotic stance. I was the center of everything. I was the
that's a feature of trips. It really.
I was the center of the universe, and at least I was connected with everything. As soon as that connection was removed, I felt isolated, alone, and the only way to remedy that and allow myself to really participate in anything was in a drunken stupor, or at least coming in or out of one. I think really I felt so lost in where I was because I had once found the solution or answers I was looking for in a psychotic stance.
You couldn't, right.
And I couldn't hold on to those or carry them with me. They diverted back into the peripheral, and I couldn't access them anymore. And I felt like I was now stuck in a place I didn't want to be, and I drank about it in a, easy sense.
Yeah. Well, this is like endlessly fascinating to me because I do consider myself a high-level spiritual seeker. Not like I've accomplished a whole lot, but like it's interesting that every revelation that I've ever come to is not a totalizing disambiguation.
Yeah, I think in psychotic, or not in psychotic, but in my experimentation with psychoactive substances, I do think I found areas that I do still hold with me. A decent example would be in one experience, I mean, anybody that has tripped can tell you this, that it's very difficult to be comfortable. You're either too hot, too cold, no matter where you're sitting, what you're wearing, you're always kind of pulling your clothes, you can never get comfortable. And that is something I keep with me today, that I seek comfort out in almost every aspect of my life, because I see it was taken away from me in these trips. And then when I got it back coming out of it, it became something that now I could recognize as important. And I think comfort is just a simple, low level experience in life that I am grateful for and, seek out actively. But yeah, again, nothing ever groundbreaking or this is the pinnacle of life or.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the confusing things, especially in AA, where you're told right away you have to have a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And then people's idea about like what that is going to be is probably like the super intense, psychotic, religious, psychoactive, psychedelic kind of thing. I mean, even just in the regular history of religions, I mean, nowadays most people's religious experience will be classified as psychosis. So, I'm just thinking of an extreme example, St. Francis ripping off his clothes and, giving away his wealth and then, preaching on the streets naked. I mean, again, historically, it's hard to know, like, how much of this stuff actually happened. And preaching to the birds and the trees, it's kind of like, I've seen dudes like that, and like there's this kind of interesting documentary called The Devil and Daniel Johnston, and it's like, this like
folk
really
singer.
Folk singer, right? Yeah, like, and he like he was psychotic naturally, he wasn't on drugs or anything like that, but like there is this idea that like that's what a religious experience is. It's this very intense thing, and it sounds to me a little bit like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like and seeing Daniel Johnston after he was on antipsychotics, he was just like this really sad, overweight, like lethargic, no longer creative or very interesting, person. And you can see why, psychotics people don't want to stay on their antipsychotics, because it's like a reduction of themselves to such a degree.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you kind of like maybe experienced a little bit of that like difference between the intensity of the trip and then like having to come down and be in a normal place. But I would just say that for me, the most important spiritual realization, and again, I don't want to be like too poo-pooey about psychedelic experience, but like, or about those kinds of like mountaintop, white lightning, whatever, God knocks you off your horse on the road to Damascus kind of experiences, the burning bush, whatever, like, those are not my experience. And like the biggest part of my recovery was learning that spiritual experience, high level spiritual seeking, is in the quotidian, everyday moments where it's not going to knock you over your head. These are things that are always, could go either way. They're ambiguous. Like the signs are often subtle. But for me, because of that level of complexity and the way in which you have to hone your own capacity to love, which in this sense means to like take all that in, and to see that happening in the regular everyday. That's what the spiritual journey is for me. It's interesting the way you explain it though, as like this almost like yearning to be back there, even though it was awful when you were there.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing is interesting.
Well, I think within my spiritual journey in AA, the biggest shift that I experienced was, you're talking about these knock you off your horse, main character experiences where you still remain as the center of God's plan. He is actively seeking you out and acting upon you. Yeah. However, I know some advice that I got from you was that, you know, immediately coming into AA, a lot of people's fear is that they have to worship a specific spiritual being, a God figure, and they're not able to do that, so they stay away. But I know, talking to you personally, you said to me that, you know, your higher level being has to be anything other than yourself. And I think it removes that fear of, it becomes less about you and more about the experiences around you, to where you are able to see those synchronicities. You're able to see those coincidences that, you know, as I get older, I've said to people, the older I get, the less I realize that coincidences are simply coincidence. There's usually something behind them. Or seeing those contradictions and being okay with it, and seeing that is where, you know, the truth lies are in these contradictions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it doesn't have
a very unscientific notion of truth. Yeah,
it doesn't have to be this lightning bolt from God specifically destined for you.
Yeah, right.
When you open yourself, that there are these little micro lightning bolts all around us that we have the privilege of observing. You know, like, I think the gift and the spiritual guidance that I've been given is to really take a step back and realize that I don't have to be impacted by some lightning bolt, and that I can observe all the great things in the world and just be a party to, not have to be the party of, you know, I don't have to be conducting, I don't have to be experiencing the world only through, you know, these big, huge, momentous moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's what kind of love is for me now. You know, having, you know, been sober for a while and whatnot, and having to work the program, like, the most important thing for me was, like, this is a Meister Eckhart kind of idea, but I had to pray that God rid me of God. And what that meant for Eckhart, and what that means for me, is, like, rid me of all my ideas about what God is, how God shows up, how God's supposed to look. You know, rid me of, like, this idea that, like, God is, like, going to show up in some big flashy way. God does, but you know, as again, maybe with the lightning bolt analogy, it's not the one lightning bolt, it's like many lightning bolts, and that's, like, God shows up in that multiplicity, not in that singularity, but, like, in that, like,
and I think
incredible variety.
I don't think those mini lightning bolts even have to affect you, but you can just notice them and recognize that they're there, and that's enough.
Which takes a lot of training.
Yeah, they don't have to directly send you in a different path or give you this enlightenment that you were searching for, but being able to sit back, notice them, appreciate them, and then, quite frankly, move on with your day. I think is a pretty...
Knowing that, for me at any rate, knowing that your day is sacred, is like, is the sacred thing you were looking for, is already here. And it's very hard for me to stay there, believe me. But but just, like, understanding that, like, whatever thing I'm doing, you know, like you said, you know, you got a lot of yard work today. That is, you are in the presence of the divine while you're doing that, whether you understand that or not. You don't need to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
Like, and it's already more subtle, complex, interesting, fascinating, loving than, like, anything you could create.
Well, I think I've heard you say the craziest trip of all is just life itself.
Totally.
You know?
It's already psychedelic as hell.
And I think that's maybe, like, why I would describe myself as having an affinity for these substances and experiences, is because I've always been tripped out by life as a whole.
Yeah.
Even, I think, at a very young age, I was just kind of perplexed that, you know, it's like, is that term sonder, where you're... I believe it's the term sonder, where you navigate through a crowd and you just have this realization that everyone you're seeing has just as an intricate life as you do. And it throws you into kind of a, you know, you kind of sit back and have to reevaluate, because the trippiest part of everything is just that we all have these, like, non-integrated lives where we all have our own experiences, relationships, and then coming together, it's almost, I don't know, it's very confusing to me at times how that's even, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, no, I think I feel it. I mean, one of the greatest things about realizing that other people have their, like their own sort of like inner life, and is like how exciting that is for me to like want to know it and like want to like be in relation to them, like beyond the fucking endless relation to myself, like that there is otherness, that there are others, and that I don't just have to like be in me, but there's like community becomes like for me the deepest form of spirituality, which I often have talked about, like is this service. So that like when I'm with somebody else, I'm listening to their story or interacting with them, like it is like this wonderful release from the bondage of self, as we say. That is like such a religious experience to me, to like encounter something again that, I understand to some degree in the other, like there's got to be some vehicle for our relation, but like that also there's like, I'm being introduced to like a entirely different universe at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, how great does it feel to uncover something new about someone that you care about?
Totally, yeah.
I mean, it is just, it makes you giddy.
Yeah.
And you want the full description of, I've never heard that before, what was that like? And it's not because you're trying to live vicariously through them, or it's just you care about that person, and finding out something that you didn't know previously.
I think that's what love is.
It's true love, yeah.
Yeah, it's because like what's the opposite of that to me is like what a lot of people call love, but it's just like this controlling, horrible thing, which is to me a horrible thing, where it's just like this person has to be, somebody who I can predict, somebody I can identify. That's what makes me feel at home, or that's what makes me feel familiar. Part of the idea of this book is like, at least for me, what makes me feel at home is the uncanny, which is like, actually in German, unheimlich, it means like unhomely. Okay. Like I'm home when I'm like being introduced to like something that's other about you or other in me. Realizing something new about somebody is so wonderful to me, whereas, maybe it would cause a more insecure person to feel like, I didn't really know this person. Like, I don't know what they're capable of, and that kind of like anxiety, which is a part of it too. But
lack of control.
Yeah, lack of control over this person.
Yeah.
Like, I need them to fit in this box or whatever. But like the enjoyment of having your boxes, your concepts for people fail is the deepest religious experience I know. And so, like, again, I would say to some degree, and again, I don't want to be a fuddy-duddy, but the psychedelic journey to me is like low-level default mode network destruction. It's low-level no self, or the big thing that everybody talks about, the ego death, but like somehow they've got the biggest fucking egos on the face of the earth. Yeah. So like, your ego died, but like you're the fucking like guru savior of the world. How does that happen exactly?
Well, I think that was a badge of honor when I was younger, is that when you would meet other people that had tripped on acid, they would ask the question, have you ever experienced an ego death?
Because that's like
if you responded no, you were out. You were not a part of the cool kids, and it was real funny because it became this
badge of honor.
A badge of honor that realistically made them more miserable to be around, than they probably were.
I've done it, man. I've been there, Like I've seen God. I died to myself and whatever.
And I think it's people wanting to, lead with a sense of mystery that they know. Yeah, they know something that no one else does. I mean, I think I fell into that. I've told you that I used to think that I could listen to people or talk to people, and they either got it or they didn't. And I never knew what that meant.
In the club or out.
But you either got it or you didn't just get it. And I really thought that I had a good radar for who got it and who didn't. And I thought I attributed that to whether or not they had experienced, psychedelic trips or not. And it gave them something.
Too much. They had too much ego, dude. Like, your ego's never like died like mine did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, you don't know what that's like or whatever. I mean, probably not. But like, like for me, again, in service to another, or just in relation to another, in loving another, like that's the most intense, delicious ego death there is. I can remember early on in recovery, it took a while, but like listening to other people around sharing their story or whatever, and then not thinking about what I was going to say when it came time for me to share, just like being sucked up into somebody else's story, and then afterwards like realizing like, God, that was awesome. Like something in me is changing. Like I'm not like trying to preach or teach or anything. I'm not trying to like have the best comment. Like you know what I mean? Like I was sucked up and totally in their story.
Yeah, I leave a lot of meetings completely just overcome with, I mean, still confused as to why I get to experience that, and still confused of how that even comes to fruition, because you leave meetings sometimes and just in awe of the capacity of another human being.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
the depth of another
human being. And people that you initially probably had, you know, stereotypical or prejudice against, like, you know, someone walks in and you're like, there's no way that they can be that deep.
Yeah.
They share and you have a new understanding of, you know, who they are. And yeah, I think AA is something that I've said it before. I will leave a meeting and talk to my partner or a friend. I'm like, I really wish you could experience it, but I know that they probably wouldn't get as much out of it as, you know, an alcoholic.
You have to be at a certain place to get anything out of it.
I mean, yeah, how would you replicate that experience for another person?
Yeah.
If it's someone that you love, you know, I would love to share something like that with them. But yeah, you realize you can't. But yeah, there's something happens inside of, you know, certain groups and certain moments that really open up, the capacity for another human being to be open and be loving. And
and everything else to me at that point feels low level compared to that. Frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, you know, meeting up with old friends from my previous life, you know, it became very hard to have those conversations that we used to have, because I would find myself trying to dive into, you know, a deeper aspect of our friendship or where they were in their like point of life, and it kind of would always come back to, you know, what hey, did you see that game last night, you know? And you're kind of like, how can I care about that? And it's not that they don't have capacities that other people do, you know.
It's not just access,
it's just not at the forefront of their mind. But it was very difficult in the beginning to, you know, have those more low level conversations and be, you know, invested, or to really leave that conversation with the same feeling that I was getting from certain meetings or groups, or, you know, even just you know, events or, you know, stuff that we would go to.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap this up. This will probably wind up being part two, the end of part two here.
Okay.
But just judging by our time, I think. But anyway, the idea of you know, searching, high level searching, the psychonaut as a searcher, and we're going to get into, you know, two of the most famous. I think more people know Terrence than they know Dennis, but and their experiments, like, they're very. I think they're probably the first ones, I think is the claim, to go down to South America and do the whole shaman ayahuasca deal,
which is now very popular.
Which is now very popular and touristy, to the point where like you literally can like get a travel agent. You know, I don't know about that, but like you know, like it's just very canned,
commodified.
Super commodified at this point. You know, just the entire concept of like, you know, the consumer relation to religious experience is like a fascinating part of this book to me, at any rate. And none of these guys were considered like, you know, lightweight tourists. Like these are considered like the hardest core of the hardest core. You know what I mean? Like, and so, you know, I think it'll be really interesting to talk about their experience within the frame of what we're talking about here, like playing with the world, with the trickster kind of a figure at the center, the irreducibility of the ambiguity, the undecidability. Like, what is it that you really learn? And you know, and Dennis is kind of like chilled out from a lot of that. Terrence is dead, but like it seemed like Terrence never really backed off from some of that stuff. Especially, it's like, I think the reason why he got so famous is because of his predictions with the Mayan calendar about like the end of the world was going to be 2012 and all this stupid shit. But like, you know, and they do a lot with time and time waves and all this kind of stuff that'll be interesting for us to think about, like just the nature of, you know, reality in terms of time, but like just how ambiguous even time, which we think is this solid and unstoppable thing, is. But and also, for both you and me, skater culture, we're of a different generation, but like that is one thing that has lasted in skater culture is like this like weird affinity for the McKennas, especially for Terrence McKenna.
Yeah.
And so like, or just like the idea of skaters like trying to, go into some like, I don't know, alternate reality or whatever has like always been a part of it for some reason. I have no idea why necessarily. We'll have to think about that. But I mean, you oddly hadn't really heard of him before, but I grew up hearing about him, especially Terrence. And then like once like this Mayan calendar thing came out, like this end of the world 2012 Terrence McKenna thing, I should say his Stone Date thesis was like a big thing.
Oh yeah.
Like people talked about that all the time.
Yeah.
When I was an undergraduate, especially.
Well, I know Joe Rogan is a popular fan of that. Yeah. I'm sure he's brought that back.
I think he's had them on his show maybe before. At least I think he's had Dennis, but I'm not sure. So we'll get in. That's gonna be a lot of fun. So with that we'll sign out unless you had anything else before we go. But hope to see everybody